Geneva, March 1980. Inside Credit Suisse, the safest place on earth for money to disappear, a young wire transfer secretary named Marie Dubois picks up a desk phone and hears a client say one word she's never allowed to write down: Moscow. She isn't a spy. She isn't trained. She doesn't even have clearance to ask questions. But buried inside her telephone is a camera, a modified MI6 unit. And every time she stamps a transfer, she's photographing the hidden bloodstream of the Cold War. Because in Geneva, the Soviet Union isn't moving tanks, it's moving cash. And Marie is about to expose it. Operation title: Marie Dubois wasn't born into espionage. She was born into procedure. Raised in French-speaking Switzerland during the 1950s, she grew up hearing one story repeated like scripture at family dinners and quiet Sunday afternoons. Her grandfather fought in the resistance during World War II. He never forgave collaborators who helped evil quietly, the ones who processed paperwork for deportations or looked away when neighbors disappeared. Marie internalized the lesson in a modern form. Don't make trouble. Don't ask questions. Don't become the problem. That discipline makes her perfect for banking. Later, it makes her perfect for intelligence. By age 24, she had mastered the art of being functionally invisible. She could process 50 wire transfers before lunch without a single error. She could smile at clients who made her uncomfortable and forget their faces by dinner. She understood that discretion wasn't just professional courtesy in Swiss banking. It was the product they sold. That skill, that perfect camouflage of competence, made her strategically valuable in ways no recruiter could have predicted during her initial bank interviews. By 1980, Marie works as an international wire transfer secretary at Credit Suisse Geneva, the kind of role no one glamorizes, but everyone depends on. She isn't moving millions herself. She's the person who sees the millions move. Embassy accounts, shell firms, discreet foundations, coded remittance notes, and strange late-afternoon consultations that feel less like banking and more like ritual. Her defining skill is simple but lethal in an intelligence context. She notices patterns other people call noise. The Soviet Union understands Switzerland's banking secrecy isn't just finance, it's camouflage. Geneva becomes a clearinghouse for diplomatic money that isn't diplomatic at all. Influence payments flow to European communist parties. Party subsidies fund propaganda machinery. Weapons brokerage deposits sit in accounts labeled as cultural exchanges. Slush funds touch Eastern Bloc embassies and pass through intermediaries like ghosts. The money behaves like a circulatory system, steady and invisible unless you're standing inside the heart. Western intelligence can't penetrate it cleanly through traditional methods. Surveillance catches meetings in parks and hotel lobbies, not ledgers. Human sources can describe intent and strategy, not receipts and account numbers. Official Swiss institutions won't openly help Britain without risking the scandal that would destroy Switzerland's most valuable export: trusted neutrality. The Swiss government maintains plausible deniability as state policy. That creates both an obstacle and an opportunity. That's why a quiet doctrine takes over inside MI6's Financial Intelligence Division. Follow the money through the weakest human link in the strongest system. Don't try to break Swiss banking laws. Find someone already inside who can see what the laws are designed to hide. The strategy requires patience, discretion, and a willingness to exploit the one truth every secure system tries to ignore. People are always the vulnerability. The trigger comes in early 1980 when Swiss NDB, the country's intelligence service, receives fragmentary reporting through a Western European liaison channel. Soviet funds are shifting routes after a minor exposure in West Germany. New intermediaries are appearing, old accounts are going dormant, and one name surfaces repeatedly in internal Credit Suisse workflows flagged during a separate compliance review. A competent secretary who keeps ending up near the transfers no one can explain. She doesn't seek the job. She doesn't volunteer for sensitive assignments. But bureaucratic shuffling keeps placing her exactly where intelligence officers need eyes. Swiss NDB concludes she represents a recruitment opportunity. She has access, routine contact with the information stream, and a psychological profile suggesting latent moral conviction beneath professional obedience. According to a personality assessment conducted without her knowledge through acquaintances and public records, Marie Dubois exhibits signs of what intelligence psychologists call directed resentment. She resents injustice, but channels it into compliance rather than confrontation. That makes her controllable. MI6 receives the assessment in February 1980. Authorization to approach her comes 6 weeks later. During those 6 weeks, Marie processes over 400 international wire transfers. 12 involve Soviet-linked accounts. She doesn't know she's already being watched. She doesn't know her routine is being mapped. She doesn't know that her grandfather's resistance story, the one she mentioned once to a colleague during a coffee break, has been logged in a recruitment file 900 kilometers away in London. All she knows is that her work feels increasingly surreal, watching millions flow through her hands to destinations she's trained never to question. The human element here is essential to understanding why the operation works. Marie isn't a thrill seeker. She isn't ideologically extreme. She's a woman in her mid-30s who lives alone in a modest apartment near a plain palais, takes the same tram to work every morning, and spends weekends reading or walking along the lake. She has no criminal record, no financial desperation, no obvious leverage points. What she has is a suppressed anger at passivity and a memory of her grandfather's disappointed eyes when anyone mentioned Switzerland's wartime neutrality. That memory is enough. In intelligence work, the best operatives aren't born, they're activated. Marie Dubois is about to be activated by someone who will make her believe she's finally honoring a legacy she thought she'd abandoned by choosing safety over principle. The approach is scheduled for March 1980. The first contact will occur in a place she considers safe, during a conversation she'll believe is coincidental. That's how penetration operations begin. Not with drama, but with a lie disguised as validation. By mid-March 1980, all elements are in position. Swiss NDB has identified the recruitment officer. MI6 has approved the operational parameters. The CIA has been informed they'll receive product downstream but will maintain no direct contact. Marie Dubois has no idea her life is about to split into two parallel tracks. One track will remain visible, the competent secretary processing transactions. The other track will be invisible, the intelligence asset photographing the financial architecture of Soviet covert operations across Europe. Both tracks will run simultaneously for 8 years. The operation is ready. But first, Marie needs to say yes. The operation begins on March 19th, 1980, in a cafe near Rue de Rhône, 3 blocks from Credit Suisse headquarters. Marie sits alone during her lunch break, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee. A man in his early 50s approaches and asks if the seat across from her is taken. She says no. His name, he explains, is Bernard. He works in compliance consulting for financial institutions. They discuss the weather, the quality of the cafe's pastries, and then, almost casually, recent changes in banking regulations. The conversation is boring. That's the point. Bernard mentions he's reviewing internal workflows at several Geneva banks following a minor scandal in Zurich involving unauthorized account access. He doesn't name Credit Suisse directly, but he implies familiarity with their systems. Marie relaxes slightly. This feels professional, not personal. He asks general questions about wire transfer procedures, the kind of questions someone in compliance would ask. She answers carefully, staying within the bounds of what's publicly discussable. After 20 minutes, he thanks her, pays for both their coffees, and leaves. The encounter feels forgettable. 3 days later, Bernard calls her office line. He apologizes for the intrusion, but explains he's writing a section of his report on workflow optimization and would value her perspective as someone with hands-on experience. Would she be willing to meet briefly to discuss general process improvements? Marie hesitates. Then she agrees. This is how recruitment works. The target makes small decisions that feel reasonable until the cumulative weight makes retreat impossible. The second meeting occurs on March 27, 1980. In a small conference room Bernard has rented in a business hotel near the lake. The setting is neutral, professional, almost sterile. They discuss wire transfer efficiency for 15 minutes. Then Bernard shifts the frame. He mentions he's also consulting for entities concerned about financial channels being exploited for purposes beyond commerce. He doesn't say intelligence, he says concerned entities. Marie's posture changes. She understands the implication. Bernard presents the proposition with careful phrasing. Certain accounts passing through Credit Suisse are suspected of funding activities that destabilize European democracies. Not through violence, but through influence. Political parties, media campaigns, infrastructure that corrodes institutions from within. Swiss law prevents direct investigation, but documentation of transactions, if gathered by someone already in position, could help allied governments protect themselves without violating Swiss sovereignty. He doesn't ask her to steal. He asks her to notice and record what she already sees. Then comes the moral framing. Bernard mentions her grandfather's resistance work. He doesn't ask how he knows. The implication is clear. Someone has researched her background. He positions her not as a traitor to Swiss neutrality, but as someone honoring a legacy of resistance against covert invasion. The Soviet Union isn't sending troops into Switzerland. It's sending money. And money, left unchecked, purchases the same outcomes as occupation. Marie doesn't speak for nearly a minute. Then she asks the only question that matters. What would you need me to do? The compensation is presented as secondary, almost an afterthought. 8,000 Swiss francs per month, paid into an account established under a legitimate consultancy cover. Enough to change her life without making her reckless. Enough to feel like recognition rather than bribery. Marie doesn't say yes immediately. She says what a secretary says when she's afraid but tempted. I'll think about it. Bernard nods. He gives her a phone number she can call from any public phone if she decides to proceed. The meeting ends. Marie walks back to her apartment and doesn't sleep that night. She calls the number 4 days later on April 2nd, 1980. She speaks 3 sentences. I want to help. I need to know I'm doing the right thing. What happens if I'm caught? Bernard's response is calibrated to reassure without lying. You're not stealing. You're documenting. If questions arise, you're a compliance-minded employee keeping personal records. The risk is minimal if the protocols are followed. Swiss authorities won't look for something they don't want to find. Marie exhales. She agrees. From the start, the operational structure is designed for survivability, not spectacle. Marie is not treated like an adventurous field agent. She's treated like a high-friction, high-value sensor in a hostile environment. Her communications are minimized. Her exposure is compartmentalized. Swiss NDB runs the direct relationship. MI6 receives the intelligence product through liaison channels, maintaining political distance. The CIA is a downstream consumer, never her direct contact. This layered structure ensures that if any single element is compromised, the entire chain doesn't collapse. Equipment is introduced in pieces, never all at once. The core tool is the thing no one suspects: her desk phone. It's a standard Credit Suisse office telephone, beige and unremarkable. But it's been modified with a concealed camera system, referred to internally by the codename telephone lens. The camera unit is a miniaturized Minox-style device embedded in the handset's base. It's triggered by a simple physical action she already performs dozens of times a day: placing the handset down at a specific angle against a document on her desk. No dramatic button, no spy movie flourish. Just repetition disguised as routine. Marie receives the modified phone during a scheduled office equipment upgrade in mid-April 1980. A technician installs it, explaining it's part of a standardized replacement program. The technician is a Swiss NDB technical officer. Marie never learns his real name. The phone looks identical to every other phone in the building. That's the entire point. The film cartridge is accessed through a barely visible panel requiring a specific tool disguised as a key fob. Marie is trained to change the cartridge in under 30 seconds, a process she practices until it becomes muscle memory. She's trained in 3 skills only. Delivered over 2 weekends in May 1980 at a private residence in the countryside outside Geneva. First, how to photograph transaction records without altering them. The camera captures documents at an angle that minimizes glare and maximizes legibility. She learns to position papers, naturally, as if organizing her desk, not staging intelligence collection. Second, how to log client conversations from memory using a structured template. Names, account references, contextual remarks, emotional tone. She's taught to write these logs in indirect language, so if discovered, they read like her own notes, not transcripts. Third, how to flag anomalies without looking emotionally attached to them. Suspicion is normal in banking. Obsession is a red flag. The greatest obstacle isn't KGB counterintelligence operating in Geneva. It's the bank's own culture. The unspoken rule that noticing too much makes you suspicious. Credit Suisse assumes employees are loyal because the institution is powerful. Curiosity is discouraged, not through threats, but through social pressure. Asking questions about client backgrounds or transaction purposes marks you as naive, unsuited for discretionary banking. Marie must become invisible by being perfectly normal. She achieves this by staying exactly as competent and forgettable as she was before recruitment. No behavioral changes, no sudden interest in geopolitics, no lifestyle inflation that would draw attention. The final infrastructure component is a dead-drop system using innocuous handoffs. Film cartridges are concealed inside magazines, envelopes, and forgotten folders. Marie leaves them in predetermined locations: a specific trash receptacle in a public park, a magazine rack in a train station bookshop, a particular table in a library reading room. The schedule is irregular enough to avoid pattern detection, but consistent enough to build intelligence volume. Pickup is handled by Swiss NDB cutouts, who never make direct contact. Marie never meets the people who process her material. She never sees the intelligence reports her photographs generate. Compartmentalization protects everyone. The operation goes live in June 1980. The first transfer Marie photographs isn't about tanks or missiles. It's about something quieter and more insidious: cash moving to people who will change elections. A diplomatic account from an Eastern Bloc embassy initiates a transfer of 87,000 Swiss francs to an account listed under a cultural foundation based in Rome. The foundation's stated purpose is promoting East-West dialogue through academic exchanges. The transfer note references symposium sponsorship. Marie photographs the document, logs the details, and processes the transaction normally. 3 weeks later, MI6 cross-references the Foundation's directors. 4 are linked to the Italian Communist Party's International Coordination Office. Marie's first real exposure to the operation's psychological weight happens during what looks like a standard embassy transaction day in July 1980. Eastern Bloc accounts move through predictable channels. But one sequence breaks the rhythm. A diplomatic account initiates a transfer that routes through 2 intermediaries in Liechtenstein and Luxembourg, then reappears under a different label, a charity supporting Palestinian refugees. The amounts don't match the routing complexity. Marie photographs the entire chain across 3 separate transactions. The numbers tell a story the descriptions try to hide. She learns quickly the operation isn't about catching one spectacular transaction. It's about building a map. Names repeat across months. Certain banks surface as consistent intermediaries. Particular individuals appear in multiple transfers, but never as primary account holders. One man, identified only by the initials FK in transaction notes, appears in 5 separate wire sequences over 6 weeks. Marie writes his name down in her memory log and feels her heart rate change. That's her first psychological break. The moment she realizes her work isn't theoretical anymore. It's forensic. It's incriminating. And if anyone discovers what she's doing, the consequences won't be administrative. Complications arrive in September 1980 when Credit Suisse Compliance introduces a new internal policy: random desk checks designed to prevent employee fraud. Teams conduct unannounced inspections of workspaces, reviewing recent transaction logs and comparing them against documentation standards. It's not targeted at Marie. It's bank-wide. But it could end her. She must now balance 2 opposing survival strategies: keep collecting intelligence and avoid looking like she's protecting anything at all. She begins keeping her desk slightly messier than before, with personal items and stray papers creating plausible disorder. The camera phone sits in plain sight, used constantly, never suspicious precisely because it's so visible. The window for full operational exploitation opens in November 1980 when Marie is reassigned temporarily to handle higher sensitivity international wires due to staff turnover. It's bureaucratic luck, the kind that decides operations. Suddenly, she is processing transactions linked not just to Eastern Bloc embassies, but to Soviet-controlled accounts moving millions, with notes that hint at political direction rather than commerce. Over the course of 8 weeks, she photographs documentation showing systematic funding flows to 7 European entities, all ostensibly legitimate, all connected through shared intermediaries that appear nowhere in public corporate records. Then the operation escalates beyond document photography. Marie begins documenting client conversations during consultations, meetings where embassy-linked clients sit across the desk from her and speak too freely because the room feels sacred. Switzerland's secrecy makes people sloppy. They mention names. They reference timelines. They complain about delays in ways that reveal operational urgency. Marie learns the most powerful surveillance device on Earth isn't technology. It's confidence. People believe Swiss banking discretion protects them so completely that they forget the humans processing their transactions are humans at all. Her handler, Bernard, gives her a single sentence of guidance during a brief encounter in February 1981. Don't chase drama, chase repetition. And repetition is exactly what the Soviets can't hide. The same names surface monthly. The same intermediary banks process functionally identical transactions. The same patterns repeat, with enough variation to look organic, but not enough to obscure structure. Over 18 months, Marie photographs enough material to construct a network map identifying 34 intermediaries, 12 shell companies, and 6 law firms operating as financial switches for Soviet influence operations. By early 1982, Marie's routine is weaponized. Her day becomes a two-track system, banking on the surface, espionage underneath. She arrives at the office at 0812 hours, not to spy, but to be seen as diligent. First embassy batch wires begin processing at 0940 hours. She handles them calmly, with the same efficient politeness she's always displayed. At 11:15 hours, a transfer order arrives with a formatting anomaly. The beneficiary name is one character different from a known entity flagged in her mental database. It could be a typo. It could be intentional obfuscation. Marie photographs it, logs it, and moves on without visible reaction. At 13:05 hours, an account labeled as a children's charity initiates a burst of 7 transfers, each under the reporting threshold that would trigger enhanced scrutiny. Individually, they look like donations. Collectively, they behave like structured laundering. Marie photographs the entire sequence across 4 document pages. Her hands don't shake. Her expression doesn't change. She has learned to compartmentalize physical reaction from internal awareness. At 15:30 hours, an intermediary she flagged 9 months earlier appears again, this time connected to a procurement-style payment with a description mentioning industrial equipment. Her stomach tightens. Weapons don't announce themselves directly, but the money that buys them does. The critical vulnerability Marie exploits is brutally simple. Credit Suisse's secrecy architecture is designed to keep outsiders blind, not insiders honest. The bank assumes employees are loyal because the institution is powerful and pays well. That confidence creates an internal blind spot. No one expects a wire transfer secretary to be a leak, because no one respects wire transfer secretaries enough to imagine them capable of sustained deception. Marie becomes invisible by fulfilling expectations perfectly. She is competent, quiet, unmemorable. She doesn't date colleagues, she doesn't gossip. She processes transactions with mechanical reliability. That reliability is her camouflage. Her tradecraft evolves across the operation's middle years, from 1982 through 1985, into a refined system of layered deception. She never photographs the same type of document twice in exactly the same way. She varies the angles slightly, the lighting, the positioning. She varies timing to avoid creating a habit pattern that surveillance could detect. She builds plausibility by maintaining normal human error rates. Occasional small mistakes in non-sensitive transactions, rushed afternoons where she looks stressed, messy desk days that make her seem overwhelmed rather than controlled. She writes client conversation logs in indirect language designed to look like personal memory aids rather than intelligence reports. Instead of client stated funds were for political coordination, she writes, client mentioned coordination timeline, seemed concerned about delays, referenced political calendar. If discovered, these notes would appear to be her own organizational system, not espionage documentation. She stores them in a personal notebook mixed with grocery lists and appointment reminders. The mundane camouflages the sensitive. During a routine transaction session in March 1983, Marie experiences what her handlers would later describe as legend drift, the psychological blurring when operational identity begins to feel more real than original identity. A Soviet embassy official sits across from her desk, requesting expedited processing for a transfer to a Vienna-based research institute. He is polite, even charming, speaking French with a slight accent. They discuss the weather. He mentions his daughter is learning to play piano. Marie finds herself wondering if he knows what the money is actually funding. Then she realizes she's wondering if he knows that she knows. The moment lasts 3 seconds. In the post-operation psychological debrief conducted years later, analysts note this as the point where Marie's operational stress began accumulating toward unsustainable levels. But in March 1983, the mission continues. Over 8 years, Marie's intelligence production turns into a financial atlas of Soviet covert operations. MI6 and allied analysts, working from her, photographed documents and logged conversations, construct linked charts identifying 67 intermediaries, law firms in Zurich, Shell executives in Luxembourg, trusted couriers moving between Vienna and Rome, ideological cutouts in Paris providing deniable transfer points. Patterns emerge that signal operational intent. Funding spikes occur 2 to 4 months before major political events. Elections, strikes, party congresses. Money shifts routes within weeks of arrests or exposures elsewhere in Europe. Certain accounts behave like reservoirs, receiving large deposits that get parceled into dozens of smaller transfers over subsequent months. The total tracked flow reaches $180 million in covert funding routed through Swiss banking discretion between 1980 and 1988. Some funds feed European communist parties directly, shaping propaganda machinery, funding publications, subsidizing political agitation that looks grassroots but operates on external oxygen. Other streams connect to Palestinian organizations, where money behaves like life support. Steady, quiet, essential. Still other channels fund what intelligence analysts call influence infrastructure. Think tanks, academic programs, cultural organizations that shift political discourse without anyone noticing they're being financed from Moscow through Swiss intermediaries. The operational payoff is strategic, not theatrical. Swiss cooperation remains quiet, plausibly deniable at governmental level. But the consequences of Marie's intelligence land hard across multiple domains. 12 accounts are frozen through coordinated action by authorities in France, West Germany, and Italy, though never attributed publicly to Swiss-sourced intelligence. 6 weapons purchases are intercepted because Marie's documentation of payment trails reveals procurement timelines, allowing Western services to act before delivery. Entire influence networks are disrupted not through arrests, which would confirm their existence, but through financial strangulation that makes them unsustainable. For Marie personally, the cost isn't gunfights or car chases. It's identity corrosion. By 1985, she has been living a double life for 5 years. She begins to fear success more than failure. Every clean day feels suspicious. Every compliment from a supervisor feels like a test. She can't share her real life with anyone. Her friendships become shallow by necessity. She dates occasionally, but ends relationships when they threaten to become serious, because intimacy requires honesty she can't afford. Her existence becomes a single equation. Do the work, stay normal, don't get caught. The psychological toll manifests in small ways that might have exposed her if anyone had cared enough to notice. She develops insomnia, lying awake calculating detection probabilities. She begins walking different routes home, not because she's being followed, but because routine feels like vulnerability. She avoids reading newspapers that might mention geopolitical events connected to her intelligence, afraid she'll react visibly to information she's not supposed to have. During a handler meeting in June 1986, she asks if the operation has an end date. Bernard tells her it ends when the intelligence value diminishes or the risk becomes unmanageable. Neither has happened yet. By 1987, she has processed thousands of wire transfers and photographed documentation sufficient to fill classified file cabinets, trigger international incidents, and expose the myth that Swiss neutrality is purely passive. She has also accumulated 768,000 Swiss francs in her consultancy account. Money that now feels less like payment and more like evidence she can never erase. The money sits untouched, except for small, justifiable expenditures. Spending it would require explaining it. Explaining it would require lying. And Marie has learned that the lies required to protect secrets eventually become heavier than the secrets themselves. The operation's final phase, from mid-1987 through late 1988, operates under increasing strain. The Soviet Union is visibly weakening. Glasnost and perestroika create uncertainty in Moscow's covert financial networks. Some accounts go dormant. Others show erratic activity, suggesting operational panic rather than strategic planning. Western intelligence priorities are shifting toward managing Soviet collapse rather than containing Soviet expansion. Marie's intelligence remains valuable, but the urgency has changed. The question is no longer what the Soviets are funding, but how long they can keep funding it. In August 1988, Marie photographs a transfer sequence that feels different from everything before. A Soviet diplomatic account liquidates holdings and transfers the funds not to an intermediary, but directly back to Moscow. It's a withdrawal, not a distribution. She logs it and feels something unexpected. Relief mixed with loss. The operation that has defined her adult life is approaching its end. She doesn't know if she's ready for that ending or if she ever will be. The decision to terminate her active collection comes in October 1988. Swiss NDB assesses that the risk of exposure is rising as Credit Suisse modernizes its internal systems and introduces digital tracking that could reveal historical patterns in her transaction handling. The intelligence value remains significant, but the risk-reward calculation has shifted. Marie is informed during a final meeting with Bernard at the same hotel where she was recruited 8 years earlier. He thanks her for her service. He explains she'll receive a termination bonus and permanent financial security. He tells her she's made a difference. She doesn't feel like she's made a difference. She feels like she's ending a marriage to a secret that never loved her back. And still, nobody at Credit Suisse sees her. That's why the operation works. Marie Dubois retires from Credit Suisse in November 1988, officially as a loyal employee, leaving for a quieter life after 15 years of exemplary service. Her colleagues organize a small farewell gathering. They give her a watch and a card signed by people who never knew her. She smiles, thanks them, and walks out of the building for the last time, carrying a box of personal items and a secret that will follow her until she dies. Unofficially, she's being extracted from a role that has become too dangerous to sustain. The world is shifting. The Soviet Union is weakening. Financial routes are mutating, and the risk of exposure rises as institutions grow paranoid in their final years. There is no dramatic discovery, no public scandal, no newspaper headlines revealing the secretary who photographed Soviet money. That's the point. Operation Title is built to vanish into history. Credit Suisse never finds the spy, because finding her would mean admitting the system could be penetrated by someone as ordinary as a wire transfer secretary. Swiss authorities keep it quiet because Switzerland's reputation as a secure banking haven is an asset more valuable than truth. The operation's success is measured by its invisibility. Strategically, the operation delivers something Western intelligence rarely achieves in Cold War operations: a complete architecture, not a single secret. The documentation Marie provided doesn't just reveal individual transactions. It proves that covert influence is less about ideology than logistics. The USSR wasn't just funding revolution through passionate believers. It was financing infrastructure. intermediaries who could be trusted, deniable pipelines that could absorb scrutiny, repeatable methods that could scale across borders. That understanding shapes Western counterintelligence strategy for the remaining years of the Cold War and beyond. The intelligence Marie collected contributes to 12 account freezes, 6 weapons intercepts, and the disruption of influence networks across 7 European countries. But none of this is publicly attributed to a single source. The successes are distributed across multiple agencies, multiple explanations, multiple narratives that protect the operational secret. Marie's name appears in no public record. Her contribution is acknowledged in classified assessments she will never read, written by analysts she will never meet, preserved in archives she will never access. The cost is human and institutional. Marie loses any clean sense of self. She will spend the rest of her life unable to explain who she was during the years that mattered most. She can't tell friends why she never married or had children. She can't explain the money that allows her to live comfortably in Montreux, the small city on Lake Geneva where she relocates in 1989. She can't share the pride that might come from knowing she helped prevent violence and disrupted covert subversion. The silence is absolute. The recognition is zero. Switzerland compromises its neutrality without ever admitting it. Swiss NDB's cooperation with MI6 through Marie's operation represents a quiet acknowledgement that neutrality has limits when national security interests align with Western intelligence objectives. But that acknowledgement remains classified, buried in files that won't be declassified for decades, if ever. Switzerland maintains its public posture as a neutral haven, while privately accepting that its banking system was used to track and disrupt operations by a geopolitical adversary. Western intelligence agencies learn that financial espionage can be more decisive than traditional human intelligence operations because it targets capability rather than intention. Knowing what the Soviets plan to do is valuable. Knowing how they pay for it and being able to strangle those payment channels is operational power. That lesson shapes intelligence priorities in the post-Cold War era, where financial tracking becomes central to counter-terrorism and counter-proliferation efforts. As the Berlin Wall approaches collapse in 1989, Marie Dubois lives quietly in Montreux, carrying her payment, her silence, and the knowledge that her grandfather's legacy was honored through betrayal, disguised as patriotism. She photographs Lake Geneva occasionally, using a camera she bought with money she can't explain. She never uses her old desk phone technique. She never discusses banking. She tells people she worked in administration and saved carefully. The lie is so boring that no one questions it. Marie didn't steal secrets from an enemy base. She stole them from her own desk, inside a neutral country, while pretending to serve ordinary clients. She helped stop weapons purchases and disrupt covert influence operations that threatened democratic institutions. But she also violated the trust that makes banking and civil society function at all. She turned professional discretion into espionage. She weaponized routine. She became proof that no institution is sacred once intelligence services decide the ends justify the means. From one perspective, she's a quiet defender of Europe who prevented violence without firing a shot. From another perspective, she's evidence that Western intelligence services are willing to compromise the sovereignty and neutrality of allied nations when strategic interests demand it. Both perspectives contain truth. Neither contains the whole truth. The moral question Operation Tidal leaves behind is sharper than most Cold War operations because the threat wasn't immediate, the methods weren't violent, and the target wasn't obviously evil. Marie didn't stop a terrorist attack. She documented financial transfers. The people whose plans she disrupted weren't building bombs in Geneva. They were funding influence. The line between legitimate political support and covert subversion is drawn by whoever controls the narrative. If you discovered your country secretly ran intelligence, operations through its neutral institutions to track foreign influence and prevent covert funding of destabilizing activities, would you call it necessary protection or institutional corruption? If that operation violated banking secrecy laws, compromised diplomatic neutrality, and turned ordinary employees into covert assets without public debate or democratic oversight, does the outcome justify the method? And if the answer depends on whether you trust the intelligence services making those decisions, what does that say about the relationship between security and democracy? Marie Dubois spent 8 years believing she was honoring her grandfather's resistance legacy. She may have been right. She may have been manipulated. Or perhaps both things are true simultaneously, which is the most unsettling possibility of all. Drop your perspective in the comments. If this story made you question whether secrecy can serve democracy or only undermine it, share this video, because the operations that shape history aren't always the ones we're allowed to know about until long after they've already changed everything.